My dearest friend, Princesse, I've known you for over a decade. You and I have had several conversations. We've seen each other evolve over several years. And so I'm really excited to have you here.
I'm excited too.
I'm excited to talk to you specifically about healing trauma within our body and how movement and yoga, really tuning into that to release trauma. You're the expert in this, so I'm excited about that. But I want people to know your background. So let me give folks just a little bit about who you are. Princesse DesRose. You're an internationally trained and certified yoga therapist whose work is centered on yogic movement of rest. You're the owner and founder of Lumiere Wellness, with a mission of creating access to all people while also creating space for everybody to breathe and to feel their breath. You believe in whole body wellness and healing and how it comes through intentional movement and intentional rest. I love the rest part of it. You are a well-being advocate who lives by the yogic mantra that how we live on the mat is how we live off the mat. And Princess, every time I talk to you, it's like you take me to a different place. You just take me to a different place because you remind me, I've come to you for advice. I've come to you for insight. I've come to you for just holding space with me. And you've risen to every occasion that I brought to you. So I'm just excited. So my first question to you is around how yoga and movement has played a role in your healing journey.
Oh, we're going that.
Then we're gonna go right into it.
Right. Okay, great. Well, also thank you. Like I am so much I feel energized, just energized to be in this space and to see it come to life. And also that's the yoga, right? So the word yoga means to yoke, yoking body, mind, and spirit. And for me personally, yoga, the journey, how I got here was really just a place of my own personal healing. My dad passed away in 2006, and I didn't really know how to deal with trauma. I was pretty young, and I didn't know how to deal with loss. And I happened to walk into a yoga class on my college campus, and I felt good. And I was like, oh, okay, it makes you feel good. And then from there, it was I'd hop into a random class at a gym, and it was just yoga would make me feel good in my body. And I started doing more and more yoga as a way to feel better. I was very, I'm first generation. I'm Haitian. My parents are from Haiti. And I was very much goal driven of get the degree, fight for the job, get into corporate. And it never crossed my mind to be in this work. It was just more of a way of my own personal healing and coping with depression, anxiety, the loss of my father. And it wasn't really until 2016, one of my teachers, Dana Baptiste, her work is amazing. And one of the things that she led and guided me with is that, she kind of pushed me and she's it's time for you to be a teacher. She's you've been working at the studio, you've been helping out, which has been amazing, but it's time. And I just never thought about teaching. And that push kind of spearheaded so many things because I did my 200-hour teacher training back in 2016. And then from there, I was I need to be a yoga therapist, because yoga therapy is the work of helping people release trauma in their body through movement and breath. It is the more deeper practice of being in this space of really just resting within the discomfort so we can heal through it. Because many people often, there's this book called The Body Keeps the Score. And in that book, the context is that our bodies hold trauma. And when we understand that our bodies hold trauma, we also understand that we can move through it. We can breathe through it. But we have to be able to have the tools and the support, whether it's talk therapy, yoga therapy, and I strongly believe in modalities that support each of that. I believe in having a yoga therapist and a talk therapist to kind of move through the movement and then talk through it. And that was just like my journey right there. Was just kind of coming into that space. And right after my 200-hour, I went to yoga therapy school for like a year and a half of yoga therapy and like working under a yoga therapist who taught me many things. And that work was really centered on helping, people come into a space of healing, which was what I did for myself, was coming into that yoga for my own personal healing.
That's interesting because people typically, when they think of yoga, they think of working out, building muscle. Not all the time. Some folks actually do think about it in correlation to healing and releasing body trauma. But when I talk to folks, they'll go to these yoga classes and they do the one-off or they go every whatever week. But I think that the way you're talking about it is different because the purpose isn't just to tone and build muscle and to look good.
Right.
Like it is actually to look in deep within yourself and truly examine your body and then feel good. What does it take to feel good? And utilizing yoga to do that.
Right. I also think like, I always often tell people I do the Instagram yoga, and that's also like
that's fine.
That's like, yeah, and like it's the asana, right? So like asana and yoga means the movement because we need the movement, and yoga has 8 limbs. So there's like the movement, the breath, the seat, which is the meditation, and it's really being able to understand and let your body speak to you throughout the practice. Because yoga is a practice. It's not something that we've mastered. We're continually in the practice of like doing the things. So whether someone's choosing to do the movement, are we intentional? Because it's an intentionality piece. Like the intentionality piece of like, well, how are you moving through this practice? Even if you are wanting to sweat and like get it out, like that is part of your healing. And even if like you choose the latter of like, I'm going to take a seat, I'm going to meditate, this is my yoga today. That is also the impactful work of like, okay, I'm acknowledging this intention and I'm setting it to move through the practice.
So how does the trauma settle in your body? How have you seen it and how has it happened for you? 3 questions.
I just feel like trauma's it's not linear. And, because we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, there's trauma that is so in the subconscious that we don't know. And for me, I did not understand what trauma was in a lot of senses. When, my dad passing away, that was kind of like my first introduction to like loss and like what kind of pain that feels like. And I couldn't even name it. I just felt good. It was just like me doing the movement and like going into like a regular yoga in the gym, asana, you sweat, you do a little meditation. I just felt good. And I couldn't name it. I think just most recently in the past, 5-6 years of really being able to name like what I was processing and what I was going through. Because at times when you're in the work, you don't know what's happening because the reality is we're not taught these things growing up. Like, you're taught to just be strong and push through and like, life happens and it's part of the circle of life and you'll see them again. But the reality is like mourning is important. Like the cycles of grief, like it's important to grieve. And grief looks different for everyone. Like my grief was very much of like, moving my body. Because like to be able to be in the movement of my body helped me to just like be alive. And that gave me life.
Wow. So when you started to tune into it, so grief and loss and all the things that your body was carrying and storing, when you started to tune into it, where physically was it manifesting for you? Or was it physically manifesting in your body in a certain way?
I would say it's not something I like specifically like recall. Can never say that word, but I can't like recall it. But I have noticed where tightness shows up as I've been able to sit with meditation, yoga nidra, and like in my hips, where I'm just like, oh, like what am I holding on to? Like, why am I not, like, because there's a discomfort. Because, we have the discomfort like on a day-to-day, just like, moving through life. And that's why the mantra is so important. Like, how we live on the mat is how we live off the mat. But when we notice that in the meditation, we find the discomfort, maybe it's in our breath. Like, we can't breathe through it. We're holding our breath, and like, why is that showing up? And then like, it's really the process of sitting and like allowing what to come up. And that's the piece that many struggle with. Because in yoga, I often tell my students, it is like we breathe through the tightness, because that's the discomfort. So when you're in a pose, like, it's not about forcing, it's not about like pushing, it's about like relaxing in it, if that feels right for your body. Because not everything feels right for everybody, because not everybody is the same.
Right.
So it's being able to be aligned and in tune with your body. Be like, what do I need today? What is my yoga today?
What, when it comes to like, because I love that you say the body keeps score from the book. I forget that, because I'll feel tightness here and there and I just kind of ignore it, the pain. And I think Black and brown bodies, women of color, we hold a lot of that pain in our body, and it kind of becomes like normal. Like, I carry a lot of it in my upper shoulders or my back, and I'm like, that's just what it is. I don't really take a moment to be like, what is it telling me? What's my body telling me? Let's just say folks who don't do yoga or don't really understand yoga, how can you actually tune into your body to that point where you can be like, oh, that's a maybe a trauma response?
I think it's really like a piece of like, it makes me think of like in elementary school when your teachers are like before nap time. Do they still do nap time? I don't know. But
yeah,
anyways,
they do. Yeah.
okay.
I think so.
Yeah. So like before nap time, they're like, okay, everyone get quiet and we're going to lay down. And like, and my teacher in particular, she would like have us take a breath. She's like, okay, guys, inhale and then exhale and be in that space. And she's like, okay, nap time. And I just recall that being like very relaxing for many of us. And like some kids would just like knock out. And it was just so unique and interesting that just having the moment to take a breath. Because I noticed like in our society and like with speaking of Black and brown women, like burnout is the number one thing happening right now in our communities, because many don't know how to rest. And, Trisha Hersey, her book about the manifesto of rest, and really just talking about like lay down. It is okay to lay down. Like capitalism is pushing us to live in these boxes and these narratives. Like, when's the last time you just took a nap and really paused? And, Maya Angelou says like how you do anything is how you do everything. So understanding that concept of like, am I really taking care of myself? Because we talk about self-care, we talk about self this, self that, but it's about self-choosing. And what does your self-choosing really look like in the aspect of like pausing and finding your breath? And it doesn't mean that everyone has to go now and run and get a yoga mat and go to yoga all day, because yoga is a mirror. So with anything in life, like we're looking at mirrors, like this is what the world is. This is what life is all about. It's like, what in your mirror can you position to be whatever your yoga practice is? Whether it's a pause to walk in the park, whether it's getting more disciplined on your workout regimens, like allowing yourself to be in a space of openness, to feel your breath, to feel alive, to feel present. And then the thing that needs to shift will shift, because we're open to that shift.
It's so, when you're saying that, I'm like, that's beautiful, yes. But then also in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, okay, if I go take a nap, or if I go rest, or if I go pay attention to myself, guilt, shame, the like voices in my mind saying, you have responsibilities, what are you doing? You shouldn't be self-choosing, because everyone tells you shouldn't be, because it's selfish and you have to be selfless. And so, and that, I mean, there's a combination, right? There's the society telling you this, but then there's your own cultural background, your family, all the demands of your life. How do you rest? when all of those things are ruminating, circulating your brain.
Especially if you haven't seen it, right? So
That's right.
I mean, I am like, I'm not all like, it's not all butterflies and sunflowers over here. Like, though I love them, but like really it's work. It's work to not have the guilt of like, oh, I have a master's and I'm not using it, in the sense of like not using it because society tells me you went through all this school. You have to now work the corporate job and do the thing. And in reality, it's like, am I living my purpose? Am I living my truth? And again, we haven't seen it. Like, again, my parents are first generation.
No.
I've seen my mother work hard, push herself, and like be tirelessly, like a mother of 6 girls. And, you know, that was the generation to do that. And it's almost uncommon for them now to rest. And like, we have to remind her, Mom, it's okay. Like, we can help you. You can like lay down, you can take a nap. And it's been a newfound thing for her to like pause and be like, oh, I can. Or, oh, like it looks different how I show up for my family.
Yeah.
I don't have to show up in this like grind mentality in order to be, you know, present or be of value.
Yeah.
And I really believe for many of us, it's about really unlocking the narratives that we've been given and really letting them go. Because for me, it's just like, I had to release a lot of that. It was a lot of releasing of like, I am not a failure because I'm not doing X. You know, I am still valuable. I am self-worth. Self-choosing is the most important thing for me because that's how I am better to show up in my communities, in my relationships, within my villages, like however it looks, like I'm better able to show up when I self-choose. I can serve better. I can love better. And most importantly, I can heal.
Is healing considered a luxury? I say that because I've heard people say along the same lines of rest is that, I mean, I've heard people say this. I've heard people say to me, oh, you know, the luxury that you get to meditate, the luxury that you get to, you know, go do yoga, the luxury, and there is some luxury to it in terms of financial luxury to
100%.
access some of these things, right?
100%.
But even beyond that, this luxury of the people believe there's a luxury to rest, there's a luxury to have wellness in your life. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, the reality is health and wellness has a race problem. I think, you know, when we think about the Tuskegee, experiment and all the things that have happened to Black and Brown communities in this country where they were experimented on and not treated human. And, you know, we talked about trauma earlier, and the way trauma works, it doesn't mean that I had to personally experience it. It means that's in my DNA. It's in my nervous system. And as we know about biology, a woman is born with all the eggs that she will have or ever need in her life. So understanding that, then like it's in the DNA. So when we think about slavery, when we think about colonization, when we think about the harm that was caused on our nations and our people, that's in us. And when we talk about healing, it's not just our personal healing, it's healing generations that came before us. And to be chosen to do that work of like healing a generation, so that the next generation that you will be birthing will be more healed, will be more awakened, will be more enlightened. And it will be a more healing experience to live on this earth for them. And I say that to say, like, it is a luxury to heal in the sense of like, we have to be able to like break down so many barriers, and the work is difficult. I don't think that's something that we take lightly, and I do echo that again. In this country, health and wellness has a race problem. It has a problem with access. There was missing points of access. You know, the idea of going into a yoga studio and having to pay $25 for a class, like, or feeding my family, you know, like there's an access point. And, you know, my work is really centered on making it more accessible. Like, I'm really big about teaching in community, teaching free classes if I can, and looking at like the work of being energetic. Like, where can organizations and community like be able to create a space where they can pay a teacher and then allow the community to come for free? Where can it be more that we are collectively wanting to be healthy? Because we talk about it so much about like, yes, like health and wellness in our communities, in our people, in our villages, but okay, like you have to create the space. And creating that space also looks like, you know, using your energy in ways to make it accessible, but also using your energy in ways to amplify the work and make it more vocal so that more people can see the, you know, the importance of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it's also, as I was hearing you speak about that, I also feel like being in your traumas and acting in your traumas could also be a luxury, right? Because and I say this only to say that if you're not doing that work, then you're in your comfort zone. When you're doing the work, you're not in so when you're sitting there in yoga class and you feel tension in your hips and you feel through it, that's the work. You could easily move. And I'm not saying that even if you easily move just to get out of the discomfort, that's okay. But it takes work to be in healing. It takes work to be in that sort of working through that discomfort place. So as you were talking about that, I was thinking about that. And then when you were talking about how it's in our DNA, that's fascinating to me because I remember you gave me this advice maybe 2 years ago, and then maybe again recently. But you said rest because your little son is watching you. Mm-hmm. And you had told me that, you know, we don't have that example, so it's hard for us to, exactly what you just said. But you reminded me to rest because he's watching, and that we're kind of switching it up for the future generations. How is that passed down? How is whatever has happened to my ancestors, my community, passed down to me, and how does that typically manifest? And I know there's a variation, but I'm curious to know, how do people recognize that? 2 questions.
Yeah, no.
How's it passed down, and how do people recognize it?
No, I think that's a deep question. And also like emotional, right? Because I'm losing the authors on me today, but there's a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And, you know, in that it's like talking about how it is like that feeling of it's interconnected. It's in our DNA. And even taking it more modernized of like, okay, because some people are like, well, so like 400 years, a lot of people sometimes don't consider it in a sense because a lot of people are not in tune enough to understand that it's ancestral, it's heritage, just like, you know, within, you know, the white community. There is ancestral, there is also that, you know, level of capitalism that comes down the line. And it's about breaking those like barriers and being able to create space and to create access and to use privilege as a way to help others versus being able to hoard it. So it is the same with our ancestors and what we experience and how we navigate and how we strive to break free and be liberated. And even more modern, someone brought this up, and it's the killing of George Floyd, and being at home on, you know, a lockdown and watching a Black man murdered on live TV and watching it over and over and over again and being so enraged and emotional from the Black community to feel like, no, like that was my brother. That could have been my brother, my nephew, my son, somebody. And I have to watch this. And this is like still happening. And it's in our DNA, the frustration and just like, you know, on the plantations when another slave was beaten and what, you know, the reaction of the others.
Yeah.
Because it's in us to like want to be liberated and be free and like not just free ourselves, but free each other. And that when one person hurts and feels pain, we too feel pain and feel that hurt. And I think that is like the trauma of what we're working through on the healing. Because this is why people are, you know, people are like, oh, you're so passionate or emotional or whatever, how they want to deem it. It's like, I'm passionate because I am about the healing of my people.
Yeah.
I am about the release of trauma in our bodies. I'm about being able to navigate in spaces and not feel like I have to change who I am to be there. And about representation in all ways. And I really believe that work of the trauma, it's not linear. Like I said that before, it's not a linear piece of like healing and going through it. Because again, when we understand partnership and relationship, whether in community, whether in families, whether romance, in whatever way, a relationship, when we engage with one another, we're also engaging with like that trauma.
Interesting.
And like engaging with like, how are we healing each other?
Yeah.
How are we coming to a space to like be seen and to see ourselves? Because it's a mirror.
Yeah.
So like sitting here and engaging, it's like we're holding space, we're sharing space, we're allowing ourselves to be seen. And that is also part of the healing.
So beautiful. The mirror part is really, you've mentioned it so many times. You've said it to me, and that's definitely changed my perspective. Can you talk a little bit more about how we're mirroring each other, and either our traumas or our triumphs, we're mirroring one another?
Yeah, I don't know, this keeps coming up, and I think it's about like, children. And I had a friend, I went through this yoga retreat, and she was talking about her ex-husband. She's like, oh, like, nothing worked out, whatever. And she was like, all these like, negative experiences she's had since she's been divorced. And then she paused and she's like, but the greatest blessing was our child. And we had this child together. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that he was supposed to be the father of that child and I was supposed to be his mother. And understanding, that was a testimony, a little blinking light. That was a testimony of that. But understanding the truth of that and the testimony of that, out of all the billions of people on the earth, you and this person come together and have a child and have a family. And then what that looks like. And your DNAs are connected now. And their journey begins on this earth. And also the journey of like two different families and like that healing piece. And then that mirror of like what it looks like to heal and to grow together and to create another human being. And I really try to sit with that a lot because like, it is very intentional how we engage, as it should be. And even in the sense of like procreation. And I believe that our generation, our mission and purpose is to minimize the trauma of our children. Oh. And that minimizing of their trauma looks a lot like being intentional about the partner that we choose, being intentional about like when our child like has a reaction, how do we respond? Being intentional about being more loving and taking it easy. And that goes into the work of our self-care, our self-choosing to be like, oh, like I gotta pause because this child it's not my mom. It's not how I was raised.
Yeah.
Like I want them to have another experience. I want them to have a more calmer nervous system. And what does that look like? And when we talk about that mirror, it looks like, being able to have examples in our community. Though we didn't see it growing up at times, we can see it in our communities by the ones that we engage with and how they, rear their children and how they engage with one another. And you're like, okay, like I like that. And we pick up little things. For me, that's what I do. Like I have many friends who are married and have kids and have beautiful families and who are growing in relationships and partnerships, but most importantly, how they rear their children. And, as like the auntie to all these kids and watching them, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like it's beautiful because it is a mirror, because it also heals me to know like, oh, like it could be soft and still be, beneficial and like still get through to the child and still allow them to be authentic and liberated and live in their truth, because they come here as whole people trying to navigate this new body in this new place. And we're watching them through our own eyes and realizing like, oh, that's what I did. That's how I navigated. That's how I came to be. And also like there's healing that we interconnectedly have as we allow ourselves to be in that mirror space. Yeah. Whether it's with our children, whether it's with our families, whether it's in sister friendships, like whatever it is, it's like a beautiful space of being in a relationship.
Yeah. And it's an opportunity to look in that mirror, that person, and ask yourself, what is it that I need to be learning? What is it that, my child's throwing a tantrum? What is it about me that I need to really, because I'm feeling this thing and I'm feeling this thing because my mom felt this thing. And to take a moment to ask that question with the framework that you just put into place in terms of everything is a mirror. What is this moment teaching me? And that's really, I mean, I started to do that because you told me to do that. That's a why. I started to do that. And it's interesting because there's that path where people can be in the moment when something challenging is happening, where they can either be a victim to it or they could ask the question, how do I learn? And there's obviously variation in between. What has been that moment for you recently?
I'm sorry. What's
when a challenge has risen and you've had sort of this path because it's a mirror,
right?
Where you could either be a victim to it or potentially ask the question, what is this moment teaching me? What has that been for you recently? I'm going to open it up.
I feel like I heard the question the first time, but it was the resistance, like, and real time, the resistance of like, ooh, because like life is a teacher, and it will teach you so many things, and
you don't have to. You don't have to go into.
No. I'm just, I feel like there's so many things that I've like reflected on that, and I'm just like, shoot, I gotta look it up. Good, I brought my phone, because it was just like, it's like two things that are like coming into mind. So I'm gonna share them both. So we're in a full moon. If you follow that, the moon is in Aquarius. Yep. Beautiful. So, so the Hood Healer, Amani Cohen, she talks a lot about just.
And she's a Instagram.
Yeah, she's a social media. She's on social media, but her work is really rooted in community. Her work is really rooted in healing the hood, healing our people, healing our communities. And it's amazing. And like, I love, being in community because I feel like social media is like a bigger community that we can like gain knowledge and share space and like communicate in that way. And one of the things she said recently, she's like, the relationship didn't last because you wanted to be the only teacher. Yeah. And I think there's so many layers of that. And I was just, reflecting on that when it comes to relationships and being like, oh, like, how am I allowing myself to be a student here?
Wow.
Am I being a student today? And, something I learned long ago from one of my yoga teachers, and she's like, we're always students. We'll forever. To be a forever student is the work. Wow. The Buddha talks about this. And the Buddha also said attachment is the root of our suffering. And that interconnectedness of like, even Christ himself was a student. And he like sat back and was willing to learn and to gain and to let people teach him, let people wash his feet. And when you talk about that, what have I learned? Sometimes we do get into that mindset of like, I've got it. I'm like, we love the finish line. I know I do. And love the like, I gained this thing, so now I'm good. And it's like, no, we're forever students. And this life is our teacher. And the disconnect sometimes is like that child that you birth is your teacher. Yeah. They are teaching you things, teaching you how to heal differently, teaching you to be more awakened. That star seed that looks into your eyes and can see your soul because they were you. They are you. And, when I think about these little lessons that come up, I'm like, am I being a student? How can I be a better student?
I love that question. Not even just what can I learn from this is how can I be a student, a better student? That's a very like you question rather than the situation.
Yep.
Wow. So then I would say your mantra is be light, feel light, live light. This is the mantra of Lumiere Wellness as well, your business. What is that? How do you practice that? How do you let folks practice that? Even if it's not through yoga, but maybe it is through yoga. How do you actually practice that?
Yeah. So I always tell people, like, if you don't know Lumiere means light. Think of the candle on Beauty and the Beast. And when we talk about light, it's like, it illuminates all.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's a feeling within us that we can't explain only by the word light. Like, I feel light today. And really, when I was sitting with this and like, creating this, this business and creating these ideas and like working to bring this to life, I was like, I want it to mean lightness. I want people to feel light. And, whatever, your higher power is, like Buddha, Allah, like the universe, God, it's like, where is that light sit in you? And how do you feel that light? How do you resonate with that light? And it's so much about coming home to self, because that's the yoga. It's yoking body, mind, and spirit. So when we talk about be light, it's like, how are you being light? How do you feel light? How are you being a light in this world? How are you just feeling within yourself that lightness? How do you feel light? Do you feel it? Can you feel the sun on your face when you walk outside? And how are you living light? And understanding and really letting people resonate with that. Because, as a teacher, there's so many like dichotomies and conversations around it when yoga teachers speak. It's like, I'm an instructor, I'm a teacher, I'm this. And it's like, really, I'm giving an offering. And that's what I like to say. I'm offering this class to you today. As an instructor, I want to give you an offering. And you as a student then take however the offering lands for you. And it's just like thinking of Thanksgiving. Like, it's an offering. Like, here's the food, and you take what works for you. Yeah. Take what you want, and then leave the rest. But this offering is part of that being light, feeling light, and living light. It's like, where does that light show up in your body? How are you moving through this practice? And really letting people resonate that this is a community work, but an individual experience. Because to be in community helps us to elevate and to help us see things. But it is really the experience of like, I'm having a journey in life.
That's it's beautiful because it's authentically how you even live, because I've known you. So not only is your business built on that, this is you living and breathing light. One of the biggest parts of your work is community access. You had mentioned that earlier, and making sure that wellness is accessible to everyone. How has that looked for you in your practice?
Yeah, I think it's like many ways, right? I think everything's seasonal, and it's often said like not everything blooms all year round. So allowing things to come and go and what it looks like. So I've taught many community classes, like, at local malls and different things like that. And as a teacher, it's also learning how to be a student and learning from other teachers. And I never feel so advanced that I can't pick up another training or like allow myself to be in someone else's class, because I find that is also part of being in community and giving access. Because access also means allowing space for others to come on the stage and share it with you. Because this work is not singular. Because I don't believe in scarcity. I don't believe that there's not enough. I believe there's enough. And then, capitalism, society makes us think that there's not. Yeah. So, how do I get in community? What does that look like? And community also means like in the entrepreneur and corporate spaces as well. It's like, how am I allowing them to be in this work with me and understanding like your people are struggling, and how do you create wellness in your spaces, in these corporate spaces? How you as an entrepreneur have left a company and now you're still grinding. Is this the work that you really want to be in? I know that you're loving your business, but how are you being well? Yeah. And I think that we're slowly in our communities getting to that understanding. 2020 feels like yesterday, but it definitely was, this 4-year span of like burdens and grinding and like struggle and like stress and anxiety. And I believe that 2024, we're just now feeling it. We're just now feeling that residue of what these past 4 years were, and being able to allow ourselves to kind of breathe, but also be awakened to like, what healing do I need now? Yeah. what does slowing down really truly mean for me? Or am I taking that necessary pause?
Which, I mean, I'm thinking about 2020 and all those that I've known around me. After 2020, we just went back into it. Kids went to school, went back to work. Things looked different, but they didn't feel different. We just went back into life, but everything changed. So have we taken a time to heal that moment? And you're saying, let's take the time to heal that moment. And many moments before that, but 100%. That particular time in our history just a few years ago has really caused quite a bit of drama.
Yeah. I think it's also trauma, right? Like we are, like, the burnout is real.
Yeah.
And there is this huge conversation right now of loneliness. People don't know how to be with others.
Yeah.
Like, being locked down and being alone did a number on many people.
Yeah.
And we're not, as a community, as a whole, as a nation, speaking of these things. And, you know, my work is really about, like, just, like, bringing awareness, bringing light to it.
Yeah.
Because many people believe, like, if it's in the dark, I don't have to talk about it.
Yep.
If it's, like, not coming up, I don't have to talk about it until it's too late. And the bigger conversation is, like, how do we in a community not being unapologetic?
Yeah.
Not being unapologetic to say the thing, like, this is discomfort. Like, this is what you're feeling right now. You know, that when your chest hurts, it's not that you have heartburn, it's that you have anxiety. And right now you're taking on too much. And really being able to call in those things for one another, because sometimes we don't recognize it. Because it was a friend that told me, it's like, Princess, you are overwhelmed and I think you're depressed. Because my depression showed up more as, like, me doing so many things, but not letting anyone help me and being so hyper focused. And I didn't take a moment to be like, oh, like, I actually still need to cry. And I also still need to, like, mourn the passing of my father. But I just went right back to school and right back to work and right back to these things. And it took me a while to recognize, like, oh, this is what it looks like to just, like, pause.
Yeah. And it's simple as that. But we just, unless we have a reminder like you in our community to remind us to pause, to take a beat, to understand our body, come to yoga class that's fully accessible. I think those things are not things that we, again, weren't taught to do. And so I appreciate you being that mirror in our community to say, take a moment. It feels like your words are like a love letter to everyone to say, I love you, I care about you. I want you to do the same for yourself. That's what it feels like. When I'm sitting here talking to you, it feels like that to me. It always does for me, but everything that you've said feels like a love letter to our community to say, love on yourself, whether it be through yoga or these other ways that you suggested, breathing, resting. How can people find you? I will have all the links, but
so I'm on social media, all your social platforms, hippie.haitian, my company, also on your social platforms, Lumiere Wellness, and Princesse DesRose is my name. And yeah, like, but also find what resonates. If it's not me, find somebody.
Yeah.
Like, the work is real, and there are many in the collective doing the work of, like, empowering and helping people to be awakened to their authentic selves, to their healed selves, to their growing selves, and to their light.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Princess, and thank you for being a beacon in our community, and thank you for starting that business, because that business is going to be light for everyone. It already is. So thank you so much.